Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. If you're using this to fall asleep, get cozy and relax. Don't forget to subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Alright, let's get into the story. It was about a year ago, and I was 22 in my final year of college. I lived in a loft apartment on the third floor of a house in a neighborhood called the Cusp, just off campus. The Cusp was a safer, more family-oriented area, a mix of some college students, older folks, and families. My apartment was at the top of the house, accessible through a back door with 2 flights of stairs leading up to it. My bedroom was at the front, with 2 large windows facing the street. One night, I was coming back from working on my thesis with a classmate at her place. It was late, around midnight. I drove down my street, which ended in a cul-de-sac, looking for parking. Finding no spots, I turned around and decided to park on the main street that ran perpendicular to mine. I'd done this plenty of times before and always felt safe walking to my apartment, even late at night. After parking, I got out of my car and pulled my 2 heavy bags from the back seat. As I locked the door, I noticed a man standing in the middle of the street where mine began, about 40 feet away. His face was partially obscured by shadow, but I could tell he was staring at me. He looked to be in his 30s, dressed in ordinary clothes, with a dog, maybe a beagle, standing beside him. Normally, I'd brush it off as just some guy walking his dog, no big deal. But something about this felt off, and my gut was screaming that something wasn't right. Here's why. First, he seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. I'd been driving down my street, actively looking for parking, and I hadn't seen anyone. Not on my street, not on the main street, nowhere. Second, he wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing me. If he was walking his dog, wouldn't he be, walking? And the creepiest part, he was standing smack in the middle of the street, not on the sidewalk on either side, almost like he was trying to block the way. I fumbled with my keys to lock my car door, glancing up to see him still standing there, still staring. I knew I had to walk past him to get to my apartment, and I was starting to feel seriously uneasy. His dog was just as still as he was, not moving an inch, also staring at me. Trying to shake off the fear, I forced a half smile in his direction and said, "Hello," loudly, hoping to project confidence and show I wasn't scared. I started walking as far to the left of the street as I could, sticking to the side where my house was, gripping my house key tightly so I could unlock my door quickly. My house was 4 houses down from the corner, and there was a small street lamp in front of my neighbor's house that kept the area from being completely dark. The man didn't respond to my greeting. I avoided eye contact, keeping my gaze fixed straight ahead, but something made me glance at him, and I immediately wished I hadn't. He was grinning at me, a sinister, unsettling grin. His head was the only thing moving, slowly turning to follow me as I walked. My heart raced, and I snapped my head back forward, picking up my pace. I was mentally rifling through my bag, trying to remember where my phone was in case I needed to call 911. When I reached my house, I turned left onto the small path leading to my back door and stole a quick glance behind me. He was now standing directly under my neighbor's street lamp, like he was spotlighted, about 15 feet away, still staring, still smiling, with his frozen dog beside him. Panic surged through me, and I bolted to my door. The area around the back door wasn't well lit, and I couldn't tell if he was following me. My hand shook as I jammed the key into the lock, flung the door open, slammed it shut, and threw the deadbolt. I flipped off the stair light so he couldn't see me through the window on the second floor landing and figure out which floor I lived on. Stumbling up the stairs in the dark, I reached my apartment door, unlocked it, and slipped inside, turning off all the lights. I crept into my bedroom, grateful I'd drawn the blinds before leaving, and made a small gap with my fingers to peek outside. To my horror, he was standing in the middle of the street again, directly in front of my house, looking up at my window. He was still smiling, and now he was waving at me. I freaked out, my heart pounding as I grabbed my phone from my bag and called my dad. In hindsight, I probably should have called the police first, but I was in hysterics, sobbing as I told him what was happening. He told me to calm down, make sure all my doors and windows were locked, and call Campus PD. I followed his advice, checking every lock, then called the campus police. By then, I'd calmed down enough to explain the situation more clearly. I felt safe enough to peek out the window again, but he was gone. The campus police arrived about half an hour later, took my statement, and searched for the guy. But of course, they didn't find him. They did, however, find something unsettling: boot prints in the dirt by my back door and matching prints in the side garden my first floor neighbors kept, right under one of their windows. I made sure to warn both my first and second floor neighbors about this creep. What still haunts me the most is how I never saw him move. It was like he just appeared in each spot. I never heard footsteps or any sound to suggest he was getting closer. Every time I saw him, he was just standing there silent with his dog, who was equally motionless and quiet. That smile of his still sends shivers down my spine. I'm a fairly new police officer, fresh out of the military, and I recently completed my probationary field training period with my department a few months ago. This incident happened a couple of months after I finished training and started working patrol shifts on my own. I'm part of a small department in a rural New England town. Only 4 full-time officers, including me 8 part-timers and 8 reserve officers. The town is large in terms of land, very old, but sparsely populated. I was dispatched to a bizarre situation one night. The call came in that a woman was reporting someone in the upstairs of her home. When I arrived, I was met by a young woman about my age, who I'll call V, holding 3 kids, around 2 to 8 years old, in her arms. She was visibly distraught, and the kids were crying. V explained that she was the babysitter for these children while their parents were out of town. She had been downstairs playing with the kids when they heard a tremendous bang from upstairs, followed by another. Then it sounded like someone was jumping up and down, followed by heavy footsteps, and then the footsteps started running. The house was ancient, at least 200 to 250 years old, more like a mansion, honestly. The current owners were extremely wealthy, and V mentioned they'd done extensive renovations recently. After the renovations, she'd started hearing small noises, but nothing as intense as this. My first thought wasn't anything paranormal. I'm a skeptic when it comes to that stuff, despite a couple of odd experiences I've had myself. I figured someone was in the house, realized V and the kids were home, and was now scrambling upstairs to find a way out. I wasn't about to jump to ghost stories just yet. Given the size of the house and the potential for blind spots, I wasn't going to clear it alone, especially with my close quarters battle experience from Afghanistan. I secured V and the kids in my cruiser and positioned myself on the side of the house where I could keep an eye on both the front and rear entrances, as well as one side, covering 3/4 of the possible exits. I was the only officer on shift, so dispatch had to call for backup from a neighboring town we have a mutual aid agreement with. Fortunately, the officer was on a back road that connected directly to our town, so he arrived in about 5 minutes, along with his field training officer, FTO. I knew the other officer. He was a newbie like me, but also a combat veteran, so I trusted his clearing skills, which made me feel better. The FTO said he'd stay with V and the kids while we cleared the house. We split up to cover more ground. He entered through the rear door, and I went in through the front. We met in the middle, cleared the first floor, then the basement, then moved up to the second floor, and finally the attic. As soon as we reached the attic, we both got a wicked, creepy vibe. My buddy even said, "Man, you feeling that?" I nodded, acknowledging the uneasy feeling, but we pressed on. Deeper into the attic, we were hit with a horrible chill, but there was nothing there. No signs of disturbance, no knocked over objects, not even a mouse scurrying by. If there had been, I might have reacted instinctively and opened fire. We rechecked the entire house one more time. It was late fall, so all the windows were closed and locked from the inside. We checked every single one. The front and back doors were also locked, and V had been in a position where anyone entering would have had to walk past her and the kids to get upstairs. We went back to talk to the FTO, who had been speaking with V and the kids. He said V seemed like a nice, honest girl, and the kids were well behaved and truthful. They were all genuinely terrified, and he didn't think any of them were making this up. The 3 of us, me, my buddy, and the FTO, stood together, casually chatting, all partially facing the house. Suddenly, the FTO exclaimed, "Holy crap, that attic curtain just pulled back." My buddy and I whipped our heads around, and sure enough, the curtain in the attic window, the only window up there, which we hadn't touched, was pulled back, as if someone was peering out. From our angle, we couldn't see clearly if anyone was standing there. The FTO drew his weapon, pointed it at the window, and started shouting for us to take cover. We were already moving, knowing the drill. He ordered us to get back inside and check the attic. As we sprinted into the house, my buddy and I quickly discussed how strange it was. Why would someone pull the curtain back and just stand there, knowing we were all outside watching? We raced to the attic, only to find it empty again. The attic door was still closed when we reached it, just as it had been before. We got back outside, and the FTO said the curtain had fallen closed about 10 seconds after we entered the house. By then, another officer had arrived, so we did a perimeter check and swept the house top to bottom with fresh eyes. Nothing. No sign of anyone. We were all sufficiently freaked out at this point, but there wasn't much else we could do. V had been on the phone with the homeowners, and the FTO spoke with them as well. They arranged for V and the kids to stay in a hotel for the remainder of the parents' trip. We stayed while they packed up and left, and that was that. A couple of weeks later, I ran into V again, and we ended up becoming friends. The first time she came over to my place, we naturally talked about what had happened. She told me that since that night, the kids had been saying they saw an old lady who appeared to them and was really kind, but they also mentioned a dark man who was mean. As far as V knew, the family was planning to move out, if only for the sake of the kids' mental health. The whole thing still gives me chills, and I can't shake the feeling that something was off about that house. This incident happened almost a year ago, sometime in mid-October. A couple of friends and I had driven about an hour out of the city to visit an old high school friend, George. We spent the entire day with him, catching up, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. By the time we decided to head back home, it was late, well past midnight. My friend Lisa, who had had a few drinks, was passed out in the passenger seat, snoring softly. She decided to sleep through the ride home. My other friend, Sam, was sitting in the back seat behind Lisa, engrossed in a game on her smartphone. I was behind the wheel, following the GPS's directions to get us back to the freeway. We were driving down a dark, quiet street, flanked by thick trees on both sides, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out most of the moonlight. The atmosphere was peaceful, almost serene, with only the hum of the car's engine and the low murmur of the radio filling the silence. Suddenly, the car jolted violently, letting out a loud thud, as if I'd hit something. Sam let out a startled scream from the back seat, while Lisa remained blissfully asleep. My heart leapt into my throat, and I slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a screeching halt. Breathing heavily, I gripped the steering wheel and asked, "What the hell just happened?" Sam leaned forward, peering through the back window, and gasped. She turned to me, her face contorted with anger, and shouted, "You just hit a dog." I twisted around to look through the back window, and sure enough, there was a dog lying on the road a few yards behind us, illuminated faintly by the reddish glow of my taillights. Sam, a huge animal lover, was furious, her eyes blazing as she glared at me. She reached for the door handle, ready to jump out and rush to the animal's aid, but I grabbed her arm and stopped her. Once the initial shock of hitting a dog wore off, a gnawing feeling settled in my gut, telling me something was off. I'm no braggart, but I pride myself on being an attentive and safe driver. My eyes were glued to the road the entire time, and I was certain there hadn't been a dog in front of me before the jolt. Yes, it was dark, but my headlights would have caught any movement, and I would have seen the animal before hitting it. I leaned forward, squinting through the back window to get a better look at the dog, or at least as much as I could make out in the dim light. It was a fairly large dog, maybe the size of a golden retriever or something similar. Then I noticed something strange. Its tail was wagging. I'm no expert on animal behavior, but I was pretty damn sure a dog that had just been hit by a car wouldn't be wagging its tail. That detail sent a chill down my spine. I sat there for a moment, my mind racing, trying to piece together what was happening. Then, without a word, I pressed my foot down on the accelerator and sped off, the tires screeching against the pavement. Sam snapped at me, her voice sharp with disbelief. "What are you doing?" "Go back." She demanded I turn around, but I shook my head, my voice firm. "Something's wrong with this whole situation." Sam kept arguing, her voice rising as she insisted we had to help the dog. but she fell silent when she turned to look out the back window again. Her voice trembled as she said, "What the heck?" I glanced in the rearview mirror, and my blood ran cold. Though it was dark, I could make out the silhouettes of three large figures emerging from the trees on the side of the road. The dog, which had been lying motionless moments ago, was now up on its feet, jumping around joyfully as if nothing had happened. The three figures stood there, their heads turned in our direction, watching us as I pressed the gas pedal harder, speeding away as fast as the car could go. Sam, and I didn't say a word for the rest of the drive home. The air in the car was thick with tension, the earlier peace shattered. It wasn't until a few days later that we finally told Lisa what had happened, recounting the eerie encounter while she listened wide-eyed. We've gone back to visit George a few times since then, but we always make sure to leave well before sunset, avoiding those dark, tree-lined roads at night. The thought of what might have happened if we had gotten out of the car to check on that dog still haunts me, sending a shiver down my spine every time I think about it. To set the scene, this happened when I was about 26 years old. I'm 30 now. My husband and I were living in a military city where he was enlisted. This city wasn't just known for its military base, but also for its sky-high crime rate. If someone had warned us about it beforehand, we would have moved out of the city in a heartbeat and dealt with a long commute. We lived in a duplex in a really rough neighborhood. The duplex was set up so that if you stood in the street by our parking lot style driveway and looked at the building, our unit was on the left, our neighbors on the right, fully exposed to the street since our building was on a corner. The entire property was surrounded by a chain link fence, except for a 6-foot privacy fence that ran along the back, blocking our view of the parking lot for the apartments behind us. This detail matters, I promise. The neighborhood was a mess. Crackheads and prostitutes roamed freely, but I never felt overly unsafe. At the time, I had a 200-pound English Mastiff, an absolute sweetheart but intimidating from a distance. My size also gave me a sense of security, and we had a few kind neighbors who helped balance out the bad ones. One of those neighbors was a man named Dwayne, who walked the neighborhood regularly. He walked everywhere, and our house was roughly in the middle of his route to the store or wherever else he was going, so we'd see him at least once a day. Dwayne was friendly enough about my height and build, always smiling. Not a creepy smile, but a normal, jovial one. He never set off any alarm bells, which makes what happened all the more disturbing. We've been living in the duplex for about a year, getting to know some of our neighbors better. Up until this point, Dwayne would always wave, say hello, and make small talk. He chatted more with my husband than with me, because I don't handle southern heat well, and Dwayne could be long-winded. I'd usually wave, exchange a quick hello, and head inside after a few minutes. Everything was fine until my husband was deployed. We'd been married for 6 years at that point, and this was his 5th deployment, a 9-month stint. I was used to being on my own, and it didn't bother me much, especially since I'd already gotten the lay of the land in this new city. One day, about 2 weeks after my husband left, I was coming home from the grocery store. I'm a firm believer in making one trip with all the bags, so I loaded up my arms with everything, including milk, eggs, and other cold items, and headed for the house. Since our yard was fully fenced, I had to shut the gate behind me. Just as I managed to close it, I heard someone calling out to me. I turned and saw Dwayne walking toward me, wearing his usual wide, happy smile. I shifted the bags in my arms to give him my attention. I was raised to be polite, and since I knew him vaguely, I didn't mind saying hello. Plus, with my arms full of groceries, I figured he'd keep it short. I was wrong. Dwayne started droning on about nothing in particular, random, mundane stuff. I could only smile and nod, waiting patiently for a break in the conversation so I could excuse myself and head inside. My arms were starting to ache from the weight of the bags, but he barely paused to breathe, let alone give me a chance to speak. For a while, the conversation was harmless until, out of nowhere, he started talking about his lady friend. Without warning, he launched into explicit details about their relationship, how much she enjoyed what he could do to her, his techniques, and to my horror, how skilled he was at going down on her. I must have looked as shocked and uncomfortable as I felt because he just chuckled and kept going, as if nothing was wrong. He even had the nerve to ask if my husband was as good. At this point, the grocery bags were digging painfully into my hands and arms, and I was thoroughly creeped out. I told him I had to go put my groceries away and let the dogs out, hoping that would end the conversation. But it didn't, and what he said next was even more unsettling. "Oh yeah, your man's gone now, huh?" he said casually. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told him my husband was deployed. I hadn't told anyone except close friends. My guard went up immediately. "Yeah," he continued. "You need someone here to take care of you." "I'm fine," I said, my voice flat. For some reason, I didn't correct him or ask how he knew. Maybe part of me thought my husband might have mentioned it to him, but deep down, I knew that wasn't likely. Dwayne pressed on, undeterred. "How about I come by later and make you dinner tonight? I'm a hell of a cook." I could feel my brows furrowing, my eyes widening in disbelief. "How about 6? I can come back around 6, make you some dinner, and then we can watch some TV. You shouldn't be alone." Every hair on my body stood on end. His persistence was setting off every alarm in my head. I told him, "No thanks," and turned to walk away without looking back. I hurried inside, locked the doors, and waited until I was sure he was gone before letting the dogs out. By the time 6 p.m. rolled around, I didn't even want to be in the house in case he showed up. I made sure everything was locked up tight, got in my car, and drove around for an hour or so before coming back. When I returned, I kept the lights off except for the TV, just in case he was lurking nearby. I didn't see Dwayne for a few days, maybe a week and a half. Back then, I was a smoker, but I hated smoking in the house, so I'd usually step outside to have a cigarette while letting the dogs out. After Dwayne's creepy confrontation, I started smoking in the backyard on the back steps. From there, I could only see a small strip of the main street, as our unit was set back from the road. The neighbors' trees and bushes, along with the privacy fence between us and the apartment parking lot, made me feel relatively shielded. I thought I could stay hidden if I needed to. Or so I thought. One day, I was standing in the front yard, chatting with a sweet little old lady who lived across the street. We were having a pleasant conversation when Dwayne suddenly walked up. I immediately felt uneasy, but I figured I was safer with my neighbor there, assuming he wouldn't be as gross as before. He wasn't, but he was no less creepy. My neighbor asked if I'd quit smoking since she hadn't seen me out front lately. I hesitated, not wanting to answer with Dwayne standing there, but it didn't matter. He spoke up first, saying, "Nah, she smokes in the backyard now." My blood ran cold. I had never, not once, seen him walk by while I was in the backyard. I never caught a glimpse of him when I stepped out the front door or walked around to the back. Never. I politely excused myself and went inside, my mind racing. The only way he could have known I was smoking in the backyard was if he'd been watching me, either through the neighbors' bushes and trees or through the privacy fence by the apartments. Both possibilities were equally disturbing. I couldn't stand the thought of him spying on me from shadows. That was the last time I smoked outside. I didn't go out unless I had errands to run until my husband came home a few weeks later. When I told my husband everything, he agreed it was creepy as hell and told me to keep our Mastiff close. That dog was fiercely protective of me, and I made sure he was by my side. The last time I saw Dwayne was just a glimpse, but it was chilling. I had let the dogs out and was sitting on the couch when I heard our Mastiff lose his mind. Anyone who owns dogs knows the difference between a normal bark and an "I'm going to rip your leg off" bark. This was the latter, and it terrified me. He'd only growled protectively twice before and never barked like this. Freaked out, I opened the front door and saw Dwayne standing halfway up our driveway, like he'd been walking toward the house. It looked like he'd been heading up the fence, probably to say hi, when our Mastiff caught sight of him. The dog's barking was so ferocious it froze both Dwayne and me in place. Every hair on the dog's neck and spine was standing on end, and he charged the fence, which he could have easily taken down if he wanted to. It was clear he wanted a piece of Dwayne. Dwayne glanced at me, forced a weak smile, and waved before slowly backing out of the driveway. Our Mastiff didn't calm down until he was completely out of sight. I was so grateful that I gave the dog half a package of sliced turkey lunch meat as a reward. We'd been in that house for just over a year, and Dwayne had stopped by to talk many times before. Our Mastiff never had a problem with him until that moment. I don't know what, if anything, Dwayne had planned, but my dog, who had always been fine with him, clearly sensed something was wrong. It still freaks me out to think about why his behavior changed so suddenly. I haven't seen Dwayne since, and I'm glad for it. Let me start with a bit of background. I'm a 29-year-old Colombian woman, athletic, and a lover of adventure. I thrive on traveling, walking, hiking, and camping. This story happened about 6 years ago during one of my trips with my ex-boyfriend and our two dogs. His dog was a crossbreed, part Labrador, friendly but imposing, and mine was a golden retriever, sweet as can be but big with a powerful bark. Neither dog was scary, but their size and deep barks could make you think twice. We often took them on trails or explored the outskirts of the city, but this time, my ex had heard about a river nestled in the mountains with a breathtaking waterfall that sounded like something out of a dream. His college friends had raved about it, painting a picture of a pristine, magical place. It seemed like the perfect way to spend a Sunday morning and early afternoon, so we packed light bags with sandwiches, snacks, water, and some beers and set off with the dogs in tow. When we reached the trailhead, the dogs were bursting with energy. They always got riled up when they were together, so we assumed they just wanted to run. We let them off their leashes, and they bounded ahead. The trail started with a steep climb, forcing us to scramble over sharp rocks for about 15 minutes before we reached the actual path. Unlike the U.S., Colombia's wilderness is truly wild. No designated trails, no forest rangers, no watchtowers. Once you're outside city limits, you're on your own. There are no cops, no services, and these areas are sparsely populated, often completely deserted. The trail we were on was barely visible, just faint patches where the forest wasn't as dense, likely worn by animals or the occasional hiker. It was easy to lose the path, which we actually liked because it meant we'd likely have the place to ourselves, free to smoke, relax, and enjoy the river in peace. We were excited, pushing deeper into the forest along the almost invisible trail. After a while, we heard branches snapping, followed by voices and faint laughter. My ex and I exchanged disappointed glances. We'd hoped to be alone, and these sounds meant other people were nearby. We kept walking and soon spotted flashes of color and shapes through the bushes. They stopped when they saw us, and an elderly man waved, approaching slowly with his wife trailing behind, holding his elbow for support. They moved cautiously, and when they reached us, we exchanged pleasantries about the beauty of the day and how nice it was to hike. The man petted our dogs as he asked, "You guys heading back?" "No, actually, we just got started," I replied. "We're aiming for the waterfall up in the mountain over there." I pointed toward our destination, and his face darkened with a frown. It struck me as odd. He said, "You guys should be careful. I hear a lot of stories about people getting lost in these parts, or worse. You're better off heading back with us." We both thought he was just being overly cautious, maybe a bit of a killjoy. We considered ourselves seasoned hikers, well-versed in trails, camping, and living on the edge. My ex chuckled and said, "No, we'll be fine. We got these two beasts to protect us." We all shared a light laugh, the dogs wagging their tails at the attention. Then the man looked at me and added, "Well, anyway, be very careful. And you, sweetheart, you should tuck that little gold chain inside your shirt. You never know who's looking to yank something like that off." I hadn't even thought about it until he mentioned it. I was wearing a 24-karat gold chain, a gift from my godfather when I was born. In my family, it's a Colombian tradition for relatives and close friends to give newborns gold charms and chains, symbolizing good luck, like the gift to the three wise men to Jesus. I found the chain in my mom's safe during a recent visit and have been wearing it ever since, though I left the heavy charms behind. The chain itself made me feel safe, like a talisman. Instinctively, I grabbed it and tucked it under my shirt collar. We said our goodbyes to the couple and continued on our way. We hiked for over an hour, stopping occasionally to take pictures, sip water, or toss treats to the dogs. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and we were getting close to the mountain. We could faintly hear the roar of the waterfall. The next part of the trail was tougher. We had to climb down a literal cliff. No gear, just us and the dogs. They handled it with ease, scampering down quickly, but we had to be extra cautious. As I was descending, my ex waited at the base with his dog, Rebecca. My dog, Femina, had started back up to come down with me, as she often did when we hiked. But this time, she stopped at the top, staring into the woods beyond the cliff. Then she started growling. This was strange. Famina was the sweetest dog I'd ever known. She never growled. But now she looked fierce, her growls growing louder and more intense. I called out, "Famina! Famina, come here!" She glanced at me, halfway down a cliff, then back at the woods, then at me again before finally starting her descent. She paused every few steps to stare back at the woods, but eventually made it down to me. We continued toward the waterfall, unsettled but trying to shake it off. The mountains formed a natural basin where the waterfall cascaded from a great height into a clear, icy pond below. The water was freezing, and the sound was deafening, but the dogs were in heaven. They ran, jumped, chased each other, barked, and swam, their joy infectious. We stripped down to our swimsuits and jumped in, the cold water a blissful contrast to the hot day. We were high by then, and the sensations were vivid, almost overwhelming. We played in the water for a while, laughing and splashing before climbing out to sit on the rocks and smoke some more. After a bit, we heard the dogs barking again, but this time it wasn't playful. Their barks were loud, menacing, almost primal. We looked over and saw them at the edge of the pond, staring up at the woods on the mountain's ridge, their fur raised, looking downright menacing. I called Famina, and my ex called Rebecca, but neither budged. Their paws were planted firmly, gripping the ground, their barks so loud they drowned out the waterfall. I got up, walked over, and grabbed Famina by the torso, wrapping my arms around her like a hug and pulling her toward me. She seemed to snap out of it, licking my face furiously. I kept asking, "What's wrong, girl? What's wrong?" She whimpered, a high-pitched, almost crying sound, and paced back and forth from the pond's edge to where I knelt. I was starting to get scared. I turned to my ex and said, "Screw this, I'm out of here." She's acting really weird. Rebecca was always barking at everything, so my ex wasn't as concerned, but he agreed to leave. As we started packing, I heard something, a human whistle, like a little melody, one long note followed by two short ones. I froze, straining to hear it again over the dogs barking and the waterfall, but it was gone. I thought to myself, weirdest bird ever, and slung my backpack on. We headed back to the cliff, the dogs barking and growling growing worse, Famina whimpering by my side. It was almost impossible to hear anything else. I climbed first, my ex behind me, the dogs scrambling to the top in no time, where they continued barking and growling at the woods. I kept telling Famina to quiet down, but she wouldn't stop. I reached the top, one side a sheer drop of 50 to 80 feet, the other dense woods filled with tall pines and wild bushes. I urged my ex to hurry, the dog's behavior making me increasingly anxious. Then I heard it, branches snapping, loud and getting closer. The dogs went wild, running back and forth from the forest edge to where I stood. I stared into the woods, trying to see past the tree line, but all I saw was green, brown, and darkness. Then a figure emerged. At first, I thought it might be another couple or a hiker like us, but the figure moved oddly, heavily, deliberately, without a backpack. His hands held something in front of him, a shotgun. My heart stopped. The dog's barking reached a fever pitch, and Rebecca nearly lunged at him as he stepped out of the woods. He was stocky, wearing a black jacket, the shotgun pointed straight at me. I yelled, "Rebecca, stop it. Come here." To my surprise, she obeyed, which was unusual for her. The man spoke, his voice low and commanding. "Tell your boyfriend to come up." I took a few steps back, nearly at the cliff's edge, and looked down. My ex had heard the man and was hurrying up the cliff. I was petrified, unable to speak, my eyes locked on the dark barrel of the shotgun. Then I noticed something else, something metallic glinting at his side. A huge, rusty machete hung from his belt loop. My mind reeled, but I grabbed my ex's hand as he reached the top and faced the man. My ex was intimidating. 6 feet 8 inches, over 200 pounds, muscular, with piercing green eyes that glared at the man. He said, "Take what you want and leave us." The dog's noise was deafening. The man pointed the gun at me and said, "Grab those dogs and shut them up, or I'll shoot them both right here." I called him softly, grabbing Famina's collar. She whimpered and licked my face, confused and scared. Rebecca was trickier, so I crawled forward and grabbed her leg, then her collar, holding both dogs close while whispering, "Shoo, it's okay, girls, it's okay," over and over. Tears streamed down my face, but my ex stood firm, his fists clenched, ready to fight. Another man appeared, holding a revolver. The first man said to my ex, "Don't try anything stupid, pretty boy," and they started closing in. I thought about jumping off the cliff, but even if I survived the fall, they could shoot me from above. We were trapped. The man demanded our bags, and we slid them across the ground toward him. Then he looked at me, pointing the gun, and said, "Stand up." I could see his face now. Sunspots, bad acne, small, dark eyes like a bird's, greasy hair under a dirty black beanie, and a large, round nose that might have been comical if not for the shotgun. I stood, clutching the dog's collars tightly. Not bad at all," he said, leering at me. He turned to the man with the revolver and said, "Bring me that gold chain." I gasped, my hand instinctively touching my neck. The other man started toward me, but stopped, eyeing the dogs warily. He looked at the first man and said, "I don't like these. Let's just get rid of them." I was sobbing now, pleading, "Please don't shoot the dogs." With one hand on their leashes, I yanked the chain off my neck with the other and handed it to my ex. He knew how much it meant to me and my family, but it was the chain or our lives. He walked forward and gave it to the man, who snatched it and stepped back. The man with the revolver looked at us, then at his partners, and said, "Have you ever had your way with a little spoiled girl?" They laughed, a sickening sound. I felt like I was going to throw up. My ex's face hardened, his anger palpable. "We don't have anything else," he said. "Please, let us go." The man quieted, staring at us. "You do have something else," he said, giving me a perverted look that made my skin crawl. "I'm deciding whether to let you walk out of here with it." My ex spoke again, his voice eerily calm. "Sure, you can have your way with her. After you cowards fight me one by one and beat me until I'm dead, because that's the only way." They laughed loudly, mocking him. The man with the shotgun said, "Nah, not worth it. I can just shoot you and be done with it," and aimed at my ex. I was in shock, 1,000 thoughts racing through my head, my body trembling. This couldn't be how it ended, gunned down in the mountains over a gold chain. Then I heard it, a faint whistle far away, maybe 3 miles, the same melody as before, one long note, 2 short ones. The men heard it too. The man with the shotgun froze, tilting his head to listen. The whistle came again, the long note drawn out. The 3 men exchanged glances and started backing toward the woods, retracing their steps. The leader said, "You two are in luck," and they vanished into the trees as quickly as they'd appeared. My ex and I locked eyes, astonishment mirrored on our faces, and we bolted. We ran through the woods like maniacs. The dogs rattled but keeping pace, nearly leaping ahead. We didn't stop, didn't speak, didn't look back. Just ran, jumping over roots, stumbling through brush, until we reached the initial climb. Only then did we pause, glancing back. I thought I saw something behind the tree line, but I brushed it off, calling Famina as I scrambled down. We walked back to the main road at a slower pace, no longer excited, our minds heavy with what had just happened. I touched my neck, feeling the red mark where I'd yanked off the chain. We realized our keys were in the backpack, left behind with the men, and we'd have to figure out how to get into our flat. The weight of our near-death experience settled over us, the reality of how close we'd come to losing everything sinking in. This happened a few years back, one of those wild, off-the-grid parties you dream up when you're young and reckless. My buddy Jay owned this massive chunk of land, 9 square miles of untouched wilderness near Ward County, Colorado. It was the kind of place where you could scream your lungs out and not a soul would hear you. We figured it'd be the perfect spot to haul a few kegs, invite everyone we knew, and get absolutely wrecked. There were maybe 24 of us, a mix of close friends and random tag-alongs, ready to tear it up. This was mid-November, if I'm remembering right, and the original plan was to camp in tents around a roaring bonfire, drinking and laughing under the stars. But Mother Nature had other ideas. What started as a chilly night turned into a full-on blizzard. Visibility dropped to nothing, the wind howled like a pack of wolves, and the cold was the kind that could give you frostbite if you weren't careful. Our tent plan went out the window, and we all crammed into Jay's cabin, a rickety 600 square foot box that was never meant to hold this many people. No one cared, though. We were there to get plastered and pass out in a sweaty, drunken pile. It was chaotic, loud, and exactly what we'd signed up for. Sometime in the middle of the night, things started to quiet down. The music was off. Conversations had fizzled into slurred mumbles, and most people were either passed out or close to it. I was still buzzing, my head swimming from too many beers, but I needed a cigarette and had to take a leak. Stumbling around, I fumbled for my coat, yanked on my boots, and for good measure, threw on a couple of hats I found lying around. I pushed open the cabin door and stepped outside. The storm had eased up a bit, and the moonlight broke through the clouds, casting a glow over the snow and ice. Everything sparkled like it was coated in diamonds, beautiful, but eerie as hell. I lit my cigarette, the flame flickering in the wind, and took a long drag, savoring the burn in my lungs. Then I trudged about 20 feet into the woods to pee, my boots crunching through the fresh snow. Growing up in Colorado, you learn the frostbite wind chill chart by heart, and I couldn't shake the fact that in this weather, exposed skin could freeze in 25 minutes. That thought hit hard as I stood there midstream, my junk out in the biting cold. That's when I heard it. Something or someone, maybe 20 or 30 feet deeper into the woods. It sounded like a human voice, but the wind and snow muffled it, making it hard to be sure. The darkness didn't help. I couldn't see a damn thing beyond the trees. Still holding my cigarette, I shifted it to the corner of my mouth and channeled my inner mountain man, bellowing, "Anyone there?" I was still pissing a river, trying not to laugh at how ridiculous I must have looked. Almost instantly, a voice called back, "Over here." It was clear, unmistakable, and sounded exactly like Jay, my best friend, the guy who owned the cabin. My heart skipped a beat. Why the hell is he out here in this weather? "You okay, Jay?" I yelled, zipping up as fast as I could. No response. Just the wind whistling through the trees. Worry crept in. What if he was hurt or lost? I stubbed out my cigarette in the snow, ready to trudge deeper into the woods to check on him. But just as I took a step, I heard my name shouted loud and clear from the direction of the cabin. It was Jay's voice again, but this time it was closer, urgent. I spun around, confused as hell, and yelled back, "I'm okay." Glancing over my shoulder into the woods one last time, I started back toward the cabin, my curiosity gnawing at me. When I got to the door, there was Jay standing there, looking at me like I was half crazy. "What the hell are you doing out here?" he asked, his breath visible in the cold. I told him I'd heard someone out in the woods, and it sounded like him. He laughed it off, saying I was just drunk and hearing things. But Jay knew me well enough to take me seriously, so he humored me. We did a quick head count inside the cabin, shining a flashlight over the pile of sleeping bodies. Everyone was accounted for. No one was missing. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to the booze and the storm playing tricks on my mind. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That night, I was damn glad to be surrounded by friends, with a loaded hunting rifle propped against the wall nearby. I didn't sleep much, my mind racing with questions. Who or what had I heard out there? If I'd walked farther into the woods, what would I have found? I don't know, and maybe I don't want to. All I know is that those 9 square miles of wilderness felt a hell of a lot bigger that night, and I haven't been back since. I'm 16 and live with my mom and our cat in a cozy little cottage, the first of 4 in a quiet alleyway. Our neighbors are great, friendly folks who make the place feel like a small community. About a month ago, the cottage at number 3, which had been up for sale for ages, finally got a buyer. I was actually pretty excited about the idea of a new neighbor moving in. It's always nice to have fresh faces around, you know. When the new neighbor, Claire, came by to introduce herself, my mom was thrilled. She'd been hoping someone would snap up that house, and here was Claire, making the effort to say hi. I was at my computer, half lost in a game, but I flashed a smile her way. Claire was in her early 30s, I guess, with long brown hair and glasses. She talked fast, like she was in a hurry to get the words out, and something about her felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a nervous energy to her that made me uneasy. After a quick chat, she said goodbye and headed back to her place. I shrugged it off and went back to my game, figuring I was just being paranoid. A week later, Claire showed up again, but this time it wasn't for pleasantries. It was around 10:30 at night, and Mom and I were winding down, ready to hit the sack. Claire asked what time the local pub closed, which caught us off guard. Mom, looking a bit confused, said, I have no idea, sorry, and started to close the door. But Claire pushed back against it, her voice sharp. Are you sure? You've lived here for years, right? Mom stayed calm, replying, Yes, we have, and we're about to go to bed. Could you please leave? Claire backed off, saying, Of course, have a good night, and left. The whole exchange was weird, and it left a bad taste in my mouth. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was lying in bed, listening to music through my earbuds, when I heard a loud bang from next door, like a ladder or a bookshelf had collapsed. My heart jumped, and I bolted out of bed, creeping downstairs to check it out. But there was nothing. No more sounds, just silence. The guy in the cottage next to Claire's works night shifts as a cop, so I asked him about it a couple days later. He swore up and down that nothing had fallen or crashed in his place. It was strange, but I tried to let it go, even though it kept nagging at me. About a week after that, I got home from school, kicked off my shoes, and flopped onto the couch to watch TV. My phone rang, and the screen showed a private number. I answered, saying, Hello. A woman's voice came through, low and creepy. I saw you come into your house, young man. My blood ran cold, and I froze, gripping the phone. Who the hell is this? I snapped. The call cut off. My first thought was that it might be one of my friends pulling a prank, but none of them would take it that far. They're not that cruel. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing. Then, around 10 p.m., my phone rang again, another private number. I was already on edge, so I picked up and shouted, Whoever you are, stop screwing with me. The same voice came back, cool and taunting. This is when I had enough. I heard a faint growl, like something animalistic, and my anger boiled over. Piss off and stop stalking me, I yelled before hanging up. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I was being watched. That same night, around 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by someone banging on our front door. I'm a dumb, stubborn 16-year-old, so I stumbled downstairs to see what was going on, my heart pounding. When I opened the door, there was Claire, standing on our doorstep, a knife gleaming in her hand. Her eyes were wild, and she hissed, No screaming now. We don't want anyone to hear you. My anxiety spiked, and I was rooted to the spot, my mind racing but my body refusing to move. She slammed the door behind her and lunged at me with a knife. Pure instinct kicked in, and I dodged just in time, sprinting toward the kitchen. I grabbed the kitchen knife from the block on the counter, my hands trembling but ready to fight. Claire burst through the doorway, her face twisted with rage. That's when my mom came charging downstairs, screaming, Claire, what are you doing? Claire didn't hesitate. She ran at my mom, knife raised like she was aiming for her throat. I dropped my knife and threw myself at Claire, tackling her from behind with every ounce of strength I had. We crashed to the floor, her on top of me, and she dropped her knife in the struggle. I squirmed out from under her, pinning her down as she thrashed and reached for the blade. Mom grabbed the phone and dialed the police, her voice shaking but firm. Within 10 minutes, 2 officers arrived. By then, Claire had stopped fighting, lying limp on the floor. They cuffed her and took her away. One officer stayed to question us while the other escorted Claire to the patrol car. When he came back, his face was pale, and he could barely get the words out. Listen, he stammered. That woman, Claire, she's an escaped prisoner from the local jail, 20 minutes from here. My mom and I stared at each other, shocked and horrified. The officer explained that as he was taking her to the car, Claire admitted she was mentally ill, had broken out of prison, and had been targeting kids and teenagers to kill. My stomach dropped, and a cold dread settled over me. It's been 3 weeks since that night, and I haven't gotten any more weird calls. But I can't stop wondering, how the hell did she get my number? The thought keeps me up at night, and every creak in the house makes me jump. I'm just glad Mom and I are safe, but I'll never look at new neighbors the same way again. This happened back in 2005 when I was in 5th grade, living in western Montana. I shared a basement bedroom with my older sister, and we slept in a massive king-size bed that took up half the room. Our house was laid out in a quirky way. My bedroom window faced the backyard, and because it was in the basement, standing up put me eye level with the ground outside. If I looked up and to the left, I could see under our deck, which led to a view of the upstairs kitchen window. It's a bit confusing to explain, but that's how it was. One night, my sister and I were having a sleepover with our friend, who was squeezed into the bed between us. We'd spent the evening giggling and telling stories, but by around 1 a.m., we were starting to drift off, the room quiet except for the soft hum of the house. That's when our friend shook us awake, her voice hushed and urgent. "Guys, there's something on the deck," she whispered, pointing toward the window. We all sat up, rubbing sleep from our eyes, and peered out. Sure enough, there was a shape on the deck, a deer, we thought, standing still in the moonlight. It wasn't unusual for deer to wander through our yard in Montana, so we didn't think much of it. We muttered something about how cool it was, then flopped back down to sleep, the excitement fading fast. But our friend didn't lie down. She kept staring out the window, her eyes fixed on the deck. 5 minutes later, she shook us awake again, her voice trembling. "I don't think it's a deer," she said. "I think it's a person." My heart skipped a beat, and my sister and I bolted upright, crowding around the window to look. The shape had moved slightly, and now it was obvious. It wasn't a deer. It was the silhouette of a tall person, standing under the deck, their outline sharp against the dim light. Panic started to bubble up in my chest. As we stared, frozen, we noticed something else. 2 small, glowing green pinpoints coming from where the person's head would be. They were steady, like laser lights, and they sent a chill down my spine. "Are those binoculars?" my sister whispered, her voice barely audible. We all thought it might be night vision goggles or something, but whatever it was creepy as hell. Our eyes adjusted to the dark, and we could make out more details. It was definitely a man, and he was standing there, looking up toward the kitchen window. We were freaking out now, our breath shallow and quick. My sister grabbed my hand, and our friend clutched the blanket like it could protect her. We wanted to run upstairs and tell my parents, but the thought of passing by the kitchen, where this guy could see us, terrified us. The stairs were all the way on the other side of the house, and we'd have to go right past the deck. None of us were brave enough to move. Then our friend had an idea. She pulled out her cell phone, one of those clunky flip phones that barely worked half the time, and dialed our home phone. The landline was in the kitchen, and when it started ringing, the sound echoed through the house, loud and jarring. We watched, hearts pounding, as the man on the deck flinched at the noise. In an instant, he turned and sprinted off the deck, his footsteps thudding against the wood as he disappeared into the darkness. The second he was gone, we snapped out of our trance. We screamed, scrambling out of bed and racing upstairs, our bare feet slapping against the cold floor. We burst into my parents' room, yelling about the man on the deck and the green lights and how he'd been watching the house. My dad shot out of bed, groggy but alarmed, and grabbed the phone to call the cops. My mom tried to calm us down, but we were shaking, our words tumbling over each other as we recounted every detail. The police showed up not long after, their flashlights sweeping the yard as they searched the streets around our house. They didn't find anyone, and there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. We went back to bed eventually, but none of us slept. The image of those green lights and that shadowy figure was burned into my brain. Here's where things get even weirder. Just 2 weeks before this happened, the local police had sent out a notice to our neighborhood. It warned about a person of interest, a dangerous sexual predator with an active warrant for his arrest, who'd been spotted in the area. A tip had come in saying he was staying with a family member just 3 streets away from us. I remember my mom being on edge about it. She even drove us by the house listed in the notice one day, pointing it out and making sure we understood how serious it was. She wouldn't let us ride our bikes outside for weeks, and every time we passed that house, I'd stare at it, wondering who was inside. A couple of months later, the police caught the guy. He'd been linked to the kidnappings, abuse, and murders of 2 children and their family in Idaho, just 2 hours from our town. During his interrogations, he admitted to stalking kids by watching their homes at night, using night vision goggles, the kind that could have produced those green lights we saw. I stumbled across a weird website once that had some of his writings where he talked about living in Montana at different times. He wrote about how right before he killed that family in Idaho, he was scouting for kids to kidnap. The kids he targeted were the same age as me and my sister. The thought still gives me chills. We were just three scared girls, huddled in a basement bedroom, staring out at a monster we didn't even know was there. If that phone hadn't rung, or if he'd seen us watching him, who knows what might have happened. All I know is I've never looked at our deck the same way since. I've been living with my parents for a while now, ever since I finished school. My sister moved back in around the same time, so there are four of us rattling around in our old family home, along with 2 dogs and 3 cats. The house is ancient, creaky, and full of character, some might say too much character. It's got this open floor plan where the main living room flows into the kitchen and dining area, and there's a doorway leading to a second, smaller living room we call Living Room B. On my days off, while my sister and parents are at work, it's just me, the pets, and the house's eerie silence. I used to love that alone time, soaking up the quiet. But after what happened, I'm not so sure anymore. One afternoon, I was sprawled out in Living Room B, playing Skyrim on my Xbox. The dogs were snoozing on the couch next to me, their soft snores blending with the game's ambient soundtrack. 2 of the cats were curled up nearby, one on the armrest, the other sprawled across a sunbeam on the floor. The third cat was probably upstairs, prowling around like she owned the place. Everything felt calm, normal, the kind of lazy day where you lose yourself in a game and forget the world exists. I was deep into a quest, my character sneaking through a dungeon, when I started thinking about turning off the Xbox and taking a nap. The dogs stirred a little, and I reached over to pet one of them, feeling the warmth of their fur under my hand. That's when I heard it, my sister's voice clear as day, calling my name from Living Room A. It wasn't a shout, but it had that searching tone, like she was walking through the house looking for me. "Hey, where you at?" it seemed to say. I froze, my controller still in my hands, the game paused mid-action. My sister wasn't supposed to be home. She was at work, and I was certain of it. She left that morning, grumbling about her shift. My heart started to pound, and I sat there, straining my ears for any other sound. The dogs didn't react, still snoring away, and the cats hadn't moved an inch. The house was dead quiet. No creaks, no footsteps, nothing. I waited, expecting to hear her call again. Maybe hear her walking through the kitchen or opening the fridge like she always did when she got home. But there was nothing, just that single, unmistakable call of my name in her voice. I sat there for what felt like forever, my eyes darting to the doorway leading to Living Room A. Part of me wanted to get up and check to see if she'd somehow come home early. But another part of me, part that knew this house too well, screamed that something was wrong. This wasn't the first time I'd experienced something weird here. The house has a history of odd noises, shadows that don't quite add up, and moments that make your skin crawl. I've had my share of paranormal encounters, doors creaking open on their own, footsteps in the attic when no one's up there, but nothing like this. Nothing that mimicked someone I loved so perfectly. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I set the controller down, my hands clammy, and stood up, careful not to disturb the dogs. I crept toward the doorway, my socks silent on the hardwood floor. Peering into Living Room A, I saw exactly what I expected. Nothing. The kitchen was empty, the dining table untouched, and the front door was still locked, the deadbolt firmly in place. I called out, "Sis? You here?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the stillness of the house. No response. I checked the rest of the downstairs, my heart thudding in my chest. The bathroom was empty, the laundry room quiet. I even cracked open the back door to see if her car was in the driveway. It wasn't. She wasn't home. I knew she wasn't, but hearing her voice had rattled me so badly I had to be sure. I went back to Living Room B, sank onto the couch, and tried to focus on the game again, but my mind was racing. What the hell had just happened? Was it my imagination? The house playing tricks? Or something else? That wasn't the only time something like this happened. A few weeks later, I was walking upstairs, heading to the bathroom at the end of the hall. As I passed my bedroom, I glanced inside out of habit, checking if any of the cats were napping on my bed. That's when I saw him, my dad, standing in the middle of the room, wearing his usual white tank top. He was glaring at me, his face hard and angry, like I'd done something to piss him off. I kept walking for a second, my brain not fully registering what I'd seen. Then it hit me, Dad wasn't home. He was at work, and why the hell would he be standing in my room looking like that? I stopped dead in my tracks and whipped my head back to look again. The room was empty. No dad, no tank top, no angry glare. Just my bed, a pile of clothes on the floor, and one of the cats stretching on a windowsill. My stomach twisted, and I stood there staring into the room, half expecting him to reappear. I checked the rest of the upstairs, calling out for him, but the house was as empty as I knew it would be. When I got to the bathroom, I locked the door behind me, something I never do, and sat on the edge of the tub, trying to calm my nerves. This house has always been strange, but those two incidents shook me. The voice calling my name, so perfectly my sister's, and the sight of my dad, so real I could have sworn he was there. They weren't just random creaks or shadows. They felt deliberate, like something was mimicking the people I know, trying to lure me or mess with my head. I haven't told my family about it. They'd probably laugh it off or tell me I'm stressed. But I know what I heard and what I saw. This old house holds on to things, memories, maybe something darker, and I'm starting to think it's not done with me yet.